For 30 years, Elara had been the invisible spine of Carter Enterprises. Yet tonight, as snow swirled against the glass of their Chicago penthouse, her husband looked at her as if she were a stain on his silk lapel. The wind howled outside, battering the high-rise windows with the ferocity of a December blizzard, but the air inside was far colder. Elara stood near the marble fireplace, her hands clasped loosely in front of her modest navy dress. She watched Robert adjust his bow tie in the hallway mirror. At 62, he was still a handsome man, though the darkness of his hair was owed entirely to a bottle of dye he kept hidden in the master bath. He turned, his eyes sweeping over her not with affection, but with a critical, assessing glare that made her feel small. "Is that what you're planning to wear?" Robert asked, his voice smooth but laced with disappointment. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked over, plucking a piece of invisible lint from his tuxedo sleeve. "Elara, this is the rebranding gala. The investors are expecting vitality. Modernity. That dress, it makes you look like you're heading to a church potluck, not a billion-dollar merger." Elara instinctively touched the silver brooch pinned near her collarbone. It was a simple piece, an antique given to her by her father when the company was nothing more than a dusty office in the South Loop. "It's elegant, Robert. And it's warm. You know my arthritis acts up in this weather." "It's old," he corrected sharply. "And frankly, it makes me look old by association." He turned back to the mirror, checking his reflection for the 10th time. Elara took a slow breath, fighting the familiar sting of humiliation. She stepped forward, reaching for the string of pearls on the vanity table, the ones he had given her for their 30th anniversary. "Perhaps if I added the pearls?" "They always add a touch of—" "No," Robert cut her off, raising a hand. He pulled his phone from his pocket, and for a brief second, his face softened into a smile as he read a notification on the screen. It was a look of excitement Elara hadn't seen directed at her in a decade. He quickly slid the phone back, the smile vanishing as he turned to her again. "Listen, Elara. I've been thinking. Maybe it's best if you sit this one out." The silence that followed was heavy. "Sit it out," she repeated softly. "Robert, I haven't missed a Christmas gala since 1994. I wrote your speech for tonight. And it's a good speech," he said dismissively, grabbing his cashmere coat. "But the board, they want a fresh image. To be blunt, darling, having you there hovering in the background, looking like the help, it distracts from the message of innovation." The words hung in the air, cruel and precise. He didn't look sorry. He looked impatient. He checked his watch, then the door. "Let's be honest, Elara. You don't fit in that world anymore. Stay here where you belong." He didn't kiss her goodbye. He simply opened the heavy oak door and stepped into the hallway, already typing a reply on his phone. As the elevator doors slid shut, hiding his sneer, Elara didn't cry. She walked straight to the hidden wall safe behind the abstract painting and whispered, "You're right, Robert. It's time the world met the owner." If you felt the sting of Robert's disrespect and you are rooting for Elara to take back her power, show your support by dropping the number 8 in the comments right now. And if you haven't already, please join our growing family by subscribing to Black King and turning on the bell. Your support allows us to keep telling stories that matter. Now, let's see what history lies inside that safe. The safe clicked open not with the sound of theft, but with the heavy, satisfying thud of history being unearthed. Inside lay a stack of documents yellowed by time but preserved with care, resting beneath a layer of velvet. Elara's fingers traced the bold typography on the cover page, Elara's Legacy Holdings. It was the original charter, drafted 3 decades ago by her father, explicitly stating that the founding owner retained 60% of the voting shares, a crucial detail Robert had conveniently forgotten amidst his quest for a younger, fresher image. She pulled the papers free, the weight of them feeling like a weapon she had hesitated too long to wield. Reaching for the phone on the mahogany desk, she dialed a number she knew by heart. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice steady for the first time that evening. "I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. I will be attending the gala after all. Please meet me at the entrance with the notary seal." The lawyer's response was immediate and filled with a grim satisfaction, confirming he had been waiting for this call for years. Leaving the cold silence of the penthouse behind, Elara took a taxi through the biting Chicago wind to a quiet street in the Gold Coast district. Sarah's boutique was a sanctuary of old-world elegance, smelling of lavender and expensive silk. Sarah, a woman of Elara's age with a warm smile and sharp eyes, looked up from her appointment book as the bell chimed. She didn't need to ask why Elara was there. The fire in her old friend's eyes said everything. "He left you behind," Sarah guessed softly, locking the front door and flipping the sign to closed. "He thinks I'm invisible," Elara replied, unpinning the modest bun at the nape of her neck, letting her hair fall. "I don't want to hide anymore, Sarah. But I don't want to look like them. He told me I looked old. I don't want you to make me look 20 again. I want to look like who I am." Sarah nodded, understanding the assignment perfectly. They went to work. There was no hair dye involved, no attempt to mask the silver strands that Robert despised. Instead, Sarah styled Elara's hair into a sophisticated, high crown that shimmered like spun moonlight against her dark skin. For the dress, they bypassed the trendy, revealing sequins. Sarah pulled a garment bag from the back, a deep, rich emerald velvet gown with long sleeves and a neckline that plunged just enough to display the antique gold necklace Elara's mother had worn. When Elara finally stepped out of the dressing room, the transformation was not just physical. It was spiritual. The velvet hugged her form with dignity, the gold accents commanding attention. She stood before the full-length trifold mirror and stared. The woman looking back wasn't the maid Robert had cruelly described. She was a queen who had survived a long winter. She straightened her spine, the emerald fabric catching the light, realizing that her age wasn't a flaw to be fixed. It was the source of her authority. Stepping into the waiting limousine, she told the driver, "To the Orion Hall, please. The owner is running late." The Orion Hall was a glittering sea of fake smiles, borrowed diamonds, and ambitious handshakes, with Robert standing at the helm as if he owned the ocean. Jazz music floated through the warm air, masking the sharp whispers of gossip that circulated among Chicago's elite. Robert held a crystal champagne flute in one hand and Monica's waist in the other. She was dressed in a shimmering silver gown that was perhaps a bit too loud for the occasion, but Robert didn't care. He felt invincible. "Innovation," Robert declared to a circle of nodding investors, his voice projecting confidence. "Innovation is the heartbeat of legacy. We cannot be afraid to shed the old skin to reveal the new." He paused for effect, basking in their approval, knowing full well that those were the exact words Elara had typed out for him on their kitchen table 3 nights ago. He was effectively erasing her while using her intellect to elevate himself. He introduced Monica as the future of operations, and though a few older board members exchanged skeptical glances, no one dared to challenge the CEO on his big night. Meanwhile, outside the heavy brass doors, the reality was far less glamorous. The winter storm had picked up intensity. Joe, the 65-year-old security guard stationed at the red carpet, was shivering uncontrollably despite his uniform coat. A black sedan had pulled up slightly askew, and the venue manager, a young man in a tight suit, was currently berating Joe for it. "Move it, Joe. You're making the entrance look cluttered. We have VIPs arriving, not tourists." Joe nodded, muttering an apology, his hands numb from the cold as he tried to wave the driver on. Just as the manager turned on his heel to go back inside, a sleek, elongated limousine glided silently to the curb. It commanded space in a way the other cars hadn't. The manager stopped, ready to fawn over whoever was inside. The door opened, and a woman stepped out into the swirling snow. It was Elara, but not the Elara who had been left behind. She didn't rush toward the warmth of the hall. Instead, she paused, turning her attention to Joe. She noticed his shivering frame and the dejected slump of his shoulders. Ignoring the impatient gesture of the manager, she reached into her velvet clutch and pulled out a crisp banknote, pressing it into Joe's frozen hand along with a small, disposable hand warmer she had grabbed from her coat pocket. "Thank you for keeping us safe tonight, sir," she said, her voice cutting through the wind with genuine warmth. Joe looked up, stunned. He had spent 40 years opening doors for rich people who looked through him like he was glass. He bowed deeply, not out of duty, but out of sudden, immense respect. Elara turned and ascended the stairs, the emerald velvet of her gown trailing behind her like royalty claiming her throne. As the grand ballroom doors swung open, the chatter inside didn't just fade, it died. The jazz band faltered and stopped. All heads turned toward the entrance. Elara stood framed by the archway, silver hair gleaming, head held high. She looked magnificent. Across the room, Robert's laugh died in his throat. His eyes widened in a mixture of confusion and primal fear. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Before Robert could stutter a lie, the chairman of the board walked past him, extended a hand to Elara, and boomed into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the true founder has finally arrived. The glass has shattered, and the truth is finally out. If you are cheering for Elara right now and find value in this moment of poetic justice, please comment the number 1 below to let me know you're watching. And if you haven't joined us yet, I highly recommend subscribing to Black King and hitting that bell so you never miss a beat. Your support empowers us to keep creating these inspiring stories for you. Now let's watch the king fall." The silence in the ballroom was heavier than the massive crystal chandelier hanging above, as every eye shifted from the stunned husband to the regal woman standing in emerald velvet. Robert recovered first, though his smile was brittle, looking more like a grimace. He stepped down from the dais, moving quickly to intercept her before she could reach the microphone. "Darling," he said, his voice pitched loud enough for the front row to hear, trying to sound like a concerned spouse dealing with a confused relative. "You're confused. The medication must be mixing with the wine. Let's get you home." He reached for her arm, his grip tight and warning, but Elara didn't flinch. She simply pulled her arm away with a sharp, decisive motion that made him stumble back. "I am not confused, Robert," Elara said, her voice projecting clearly without shouting. "And I am certainly not going home." Robert turned to the crowd, laughing nervously. "I apologize, everyone. My wife, she spends a lot of time alone. She doesn't understand the complexities of business. She thinks this is a social club. Is that so?" Mr. Thompson stepped out from behind the chairman, holding a leather-bound folio. The old lawyer adjusted his spectacles and spoke into the silence. "Because according to the original charter of Carter Enterprises, Article 4, Section 2, the founding owner retains absolute veto power over the CEO position. And that owner is listed as Elara Vance Carter." Robert's face turned a shade of gray that matched the winter sky. Desperation clawed at his throat. "That paper is 30 years old. She's a housewife. She hasn't stepped foot in the office in decades. She doesn't know the first thing about the merger." He pointed an accusing finger at Elara. "Ask her about the Asian expansion. Ask her about the Q4 projections. She won't know a damn thing." Elara stepped up to the podium, the emerald velvet swaying gently. She looked at the investors, then at Robert. "The Asian expansion relies on a bridge loan from the Zurich Group at a 4.5% interest rate, contingent on the acquisition of the logistics hub in Seoul," she recited calmly, the numbers rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. "A proposal, I might add, that I drafted on my laptop while you were working late with your assistant 3 weeks ago." A gasp rippled through the room. The investors whispered furiously. Robert stood frozen, stripped of his armor. He looked small, hollow, and utterly defeated. Elara looked Robert in the eye and said into the microphone, "You were ashamed of my face, Robert. But it was this face and this mind that built the chair you sit on. And tonight, I'm taking it back. You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately." As security finally moved toward the stage to escort Robert away, he looked to Monica for support, only to find she had already disappeared into the crowd. The applause that followed wasn't for the drama. It was for the justice that felt long overdue, filling the room with a warmth that champagne could never provide. The atmosphere in the hall shifted instantly. The same board members who had sneered at Elara's absence minutes ago now swarmed around the stage, their faces arranged in masks of eager admiration. They offered handshakes, compliments, and excuses, desperate to align themselves with the power that had just asserted itself. Elara navigated the sea of sycophants with polite indifference. "We will discuss business on Monday," she told a sweating executive who tried to grab her hand. "Tonight is for clarity." She pushed gently through the crowd, her eyes fixed not on the VIP section, but on the drafty exit doors where Joe, the elderly security guard, stood shifting awkwardly on his feet. He looked worried, his eyes scanning the room as if afraid she might be in danger from the commotion she had caused. As Elara approached, the venue manager, the same young man in the tight suit, stepped in front of Joe, assuming Elara wanted to complain about the staff. "Mrs. Carter, I am so sorry if this man disturbed you," the manager stammered, glaring at Joe. "I told him to stay outside. I'll have him removed immediately." "You will do no such thing," Elara said, her voice soft but commanding enough to freeze the manager in place. She stepped past him and stopped directly in front of Joe. The old guard took off his cap, revealing thinning white hair, and lowered his gaze respectfully. "Joe," Elara said warmly, "do you remember me?" He looked up, blinking. I know who you are now, ma'am. You're the owner." Before that, she corrected gently. 5 years ago, I came here to drop off Robert's forgotten briefcase. I was wearing a rain poncho and old boots. The receptionist wouldn't let me in. She said deliveries went to the back. You were the only one who brought me a folding chair and a cup of hot coffee while I waited in the lobby. You told me, "Cole don't care how much money folks have, it bites everyone the same." Joe's eyes widened in recognition. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "I remember. You liked your coffee with 2 sugars. You didn't see a CEO's wife, and you didn't see a nuisance," Elara continued, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You just saw a person who was cold. That kind of integrity is rare in this room, Joe." She pulled a business card from her clutch, one that Mr. Thompson had freshly printed. "I am restructuring my personal security detail for the estate and the new foundation. I need a head of security I can trust. The pay is triple what you make here, with full benefits. The job is yours if you want it." Joe looked at the card, his hands trembling slightly, then at the manager who stood open-mouthed. Tears pricked the old man's eyes. I'd be honored, ma'am." Elara smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. She had dismantled an arrogant man and elevated a kind one in the span of an hour. Putting on her coat, Elara looked out at the snowy Chicago skyline and realized the cold penthouse was no longer her home. It was time to build a sanctuary of her own. Winter melted into spring, washing away the gray slush of the past to reveal something blooming and new in the heart of the city. The biting winds off Lake Michigan had softened into a gentle breeze that rustled the tulips lining the walkway of a renovated brick building in the South Loop. Above the entrance, the bronze letters didn't boast of corporate mergers or stock prices. Instead, they read simply, "The Elara Vance Foundation." It was no longer about holding power. It was about sharing it. 6 months had passed since the night at Orion Hall. In that time, the gossip columns had eventually tired of Robert's downfall. Stripped of his title and his access to the company accounts, he had retreated to a small, furnished apartment on the outskirts of the city. His calls to the friends he once impressed went unanswered, and Monica had moved on to a younger hedge fund manager before the ink on Robert's dismissal papers was even dry. He had spent a lifetime chasing the image of success, only to realize too late that without substance, an image is just a ghost. Inside the sunlit atrium of the foundation, the atmosphere was vibrant. Elara stood at the front of a seminar room, dressed not in velvet, but in a smart, comfortable linen suit that complemented her natural silver hair. Seated before her were 20 young women of color, aspiring entrepreneurs, artists, and engineers, who hung on her every word. "They will tell you that you are too quiet," Elara said, her voice steady and warm. "They will tell you that you don't look the part. They told me that for 30 years. But I want you to remember this. Your value is not in who notices you. Your value is in what you build when no one is watching." As the class broke up into applause and chatter, Elara walked toward the large glass doors that led to the garden. Standing guard there was Joe. He looked years younger than the shivering man at the gala. His uniform was tailored, his cheeks were rosy with health, and he greeted every visitor with the pride of a man who knew he was essential. "Afternoon, Mrs. Carter," he said, tipping his cap. "Fresh coffee is waiting in your office." "Thank you, Joe," she replied, pausing to catch her reflection in the glass pane. For a moment, the memory of Robert's sneer flickered in her mind. "You look like the help." She looked at herself now. She saw the lines around her eyes, the history in her skin, and the gray in her hair. She didn't see a victim, nor a shadow. She saw a woman who had bloomed late, but had bloomed the brightest. She had lost a husband who didn't deserve her, but she had found a purpose that did. She smiled, realizing that the greatest empire isn't one you rule over, but one where you lift others up to stand beside you. Just like the winter snow that melts to reveal the spring, Elara's journey reminds us that true dignity is a light that shines from within, regardless of how others may treat us. Let this be a gentle lesson to never judge a soul by their appearance, for the quietest hearts often hold the greatest empires. If you believe that kindness is the only crown worth wearing, please share this warmth with a friend and subscribe to Black King, where we honor the royalty in every human story.